So my name is Stuart Morris. I work for Greater Cambridge Shared Planning in the Planning Policy Strategy and Economy team. And we're the team responsible for producing the local plan. Now, you may be aware that a local plan was adopted for South Cambs and also Cambridge City in 2018. And we're now starting off on a new one, which is a joint local plan for Greater Cambridge, which is those two districts combined. The local plan is a document that affects essentially everything in the area in terms of homes, jobs, places we play in, and influences planning applications and also identifies new sites for development. If you were aware of the previous local plans, you might be saying, well, we only finished one a couple of years ago, why start one now? It's a fair question. In the adopted local plans completed in 2018, there is a requirement from the inspector to start a new local plan immediately, particularly relating to the delivery of new settlements included in that plan and the delivery of infrastructure to support them, alongside another number of other issues such as housing requirements and accommodation for gypsies and travellers. So there was that there, but also the issues in the area have moved on quite a lot. So if you think about the agenda on climate change and biodiversity, and there's some big infrastructure proposals going on around the area for rail and metros and things. So there's a whole host of reasons why we're starting again. We are consulting as of last week on the first round of consultation for this new joint local plan. We're calling it the first conversation, and it's not a plan in any sense. It's a whole host of questions and sets out a key number of themes, but it's really a whole wide-ranging consultation to hear your thoughts on how you think the area should change in the future. Started a week last Monday and runs till the 24th of February. I'm going to press the right way. So I'll talk a little bit about the content of that consultation. There is a paper report, but I'll talk more about what's online as well. We've shaped the consultation right now around 7 big themes, of which 4 you can see in the bits of the tree there, which a lot of thought's gone into the design of that one. But we had workshops back in the summer last year with a range of stakeholders, including members, people from statutory organisations, community groups, parish councils, residents associations for Cambridge. And these really drew out the big themes that people were concerned about or keen on focusing on were those 4 at the top. So climate change, biodiversity and green spaces, well-being and social inclusion, and great places, which I could talk about a bit more later. You may be able to see at the bottom, the roots of the tree are homes, infrastructure and jobs. And those maybe have traditionally been the big themes of the local plan, and we can't ignore them. They are ways in which you can deliver or tackle some of the issues there at the top. Those are the themes that we've come up with for this consultation, but I would say that the purpose of this consultation is to seek everybody's views. So we're saying, do you agree these are the right themes? So we're asking you whether these are the right ones, and also which one's the most important. How should we prioritise between them? Because when it comes to more detailed decisions, we're going to have to make some choices that balance them out. First of which, climate change. Both councils have resolved a climate emergency. The government has a requirement to reduce emissions to net zero carbon by 2050. So the question is really, how do we do that? And that is covers pretty much everything we do in the local plan. It's about the location of development and where it is. It's about the design of the development, and it cuts across everything we do. Biodiversity and green spaces. Again, councils have announced their intent to support the doubling nature ambition, which was set out by the Local Nature Partnership, which is a partnership of environmental groups within Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. We also declared a biodiversity emergency, and we're gathering evidence on the existing state of our green spaces, looking for enhancements, and we're asking you and everybody how we should enhance our green spaces and expand our green spaces. as a part of that, we have included in the consultation, there's a call for green space sites. So if you have a project idea or you have land you'd like to put forward for a green space site, you can do that through this consultation. So the third theme, well-being and social inclusion, is that this covers a whole range of things. So healthy lifestyles in terms of the design and location of development, in terms of jobs being in an accessible location and people can reach, in terms of homes being affordable so people can, again, not have to travel too far to get to them. It touches everything, really. And the other side of it, I guess, in terms of the inclusivity, parts of Cambridge in particular are among the most deprived in the UK. And there's a real sense, I think, particularly in the city, but recognise there's issues in the villages as well, and in the towns around Greater Cambridge, that there may be something of a divide there, and people might feel, for example, that, say, the science parks aren't a place for them if they feel like they're disadvantaged in some sense. So seeking how can we achieve places that are inclusive, people feel like they can access jobs and the things where they can get on and mix with the community. So there's a whole range of issues there too. So great places, the last theme, and I guess this focuses probably on design, recognising in terms of heritage. We've got some beautiful places in Cambridge, but also in the villages that are needing to protect those. In terms of new design, making sure that that fits with context and is also efficient design and works well with our natural resources. And responding to things such as the new National Design Guide, just in terms of the consultation. So every section of the themes I've been talking about, there's a what do we have to do, because that is a context for us. We're not got an entirely free decision. There's what's already going on, what are we already doing, which also provides that context, and then runs on to those key issues and the questions following. Going down to the roots of the tree, as I was saying, so jobs, so what kind of businesses and industrial space should we plan for? I don't know if you're aware, there was something called the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Independent Economic Review was completed in 2018. That suggested that jobs growth in this area has been much faster than anybody thought, and suggested that it could carry on a lot in future. So there's a question of how we support that, or how should we support that? Do we support it? In relation to that, there's a question of how we support the existing clusters of technology-type jobs, but also those jobs and industries that are maybe lower value but essential for maintaining a community that works. And also, I guess, changing use is a particular question about industrial space. In terms of the high-value industries, there's been a policies saying no more kind of warehousing, but with the changes to people using Amazon next day delivery and that, those kind of patterns of use are changing. So there's a need to grapple with the difficult issues. What kind of homes should we be planning for? Obviously, housing affordability is a massive challenge in this area, and we've got to try and grapple with that again, and providing a range of housing to meet different groups and different needs. And that's mixes of different groups within the population. A particular one is gypsies and travellers and caravan dwellers. And that was a key issue, as I mentioned earlier on, that the inspector raised. So we will need to address that issue and really make sure that we're providing sufficient space for people of all different groups in the community. Infrastructure. As I mentioned earlier, there's a whole range of infrastructure projects going on about East-West Rail, Cambridgeshire Autonomous Metro. There's the Greater Cambridge Partnership schemes already in, I was going to say in train, which isn't quite the right word, but projects to connect more rural communities to the city and help people get around. And there's a key question, I guess, within the consultation is how can we encourage a shift away from car use, recognising the congestion challenges we've got around here, and towards sustainable transport. But also recognising it's not just about getting around, it's also the social and community, health and education infrastructure. So there's a question again about priorities there. So those are the themes. The plan does have to grapple with housing numbers. We have a housing figure adopted in the local plans of 1,675 homes a year. Government has introduced in the last couple of years something called the standard method. That's the minimum number of homes that we have to plan for. So planning for no more homes is not an option, aside from the point that we have an affordability crisis and there are people needing homes out there. But that 1,800 roughly, that standard method is a minimum. I mentioned about the independent economic review suggesting that jobs growth could be very fast in the future, and we're looking into that in more detail. But a very rough calculation based off the back of the independent economic review suggested that to support the number of jobs that could come to the area, you might need to provide many, many more homes than that standard method, possibly around 2,900 a year. So that's the kind of bookends that we've kind of thrown out there based on the minimum of what we have to do and a kind of higher level what we might need to do to support the economy if and when it grows. So those are there, and we're asking people about their views on that. Beyond that, there's the big questions about where to build. As I say, this is the first conversation in the local plan. We're nowhere near making any decisions. And so at this point, the options that we put out there form what we consider to be essentially the reasonable choices that you could make. They are, by definition, caricatures. They're not what it's going to look like in the end. It's probably going to be a blend of all of these. But just to run through them, so one option would be to densify existing urban areas. That's Cambridge and potentially the larger settlements outside of Cambridge. Second one about building sites on the edge of Cambridge outside of the green belt. There's a couple of specific opportunities that might be possible to use there. So you may be aware of northeast Cambridge, where the existing wastewater treatment works is, but there's also Cambridge Airport. Marshalls has announced its intention to move, which would free up land there to develop, which is actually outside of the green belt. Building on the green belt is a possibility, again, that we need to look through. And then new settlements, as per North Stowe, would need to be connected by sustainable transport modes to larger settlements. Potentially focusing development much more in the villages is another option. And then further to that, building around public transport, recognising again the infrastructure proposal about the metro and the trains. As I say, those are caricatures. What we will need to do, we're seeking your views on which one to focus on, and it will be a blend of those, and we will need to test each one of these against the key issues that we've talked about before about climate change, biodiversity, just to ensure we understand the impacts before decisions are made. So that's what the consultation is about. How are we trying to engage and involve our communities? Well, I guess I'm here tonight, that's the first step. But we recognise that a lot of people have commented on local plans in the past, but maybe not always a broad, diverse range of people. There's probably sections of the community out there that maybe haven't been engaged or been interested in it. So members are very keen to try and be as full as possible and to reach out to people that might not have heard about the plan before or not have commented. Part of that we're trying to achieve is really checking the language you use and making everything in plain English. We're really pushing the online side of things. We recognise that groups of people don't use online, so we do have hard copies, but we have a website which I'll show you in a second, which we're trying to push people to and making that as accessible as possible. In terms of reaching younger people, we're trying to use video and social media, and we're also taking a roadshow to places where people are. So there's about 22 or so events that we're going to places such as Cambridge United Football Club, some of the science parks, Milton Tesco's, a whole range of places around the village, places where people would be coming to anyway, so they don't have to make the effort to come to a village hall where only a certain demographic might come to. The other event or activity that we're doing, which is completely new for us, is this big debate event, which I'll tell you about in a second. I haven't tested this, so I'll just... Do you know what to do to press go on it at all, or maybe we just go?
I love my village, but...
Okay, so there's no sound, but just imagine the sound. You've got
And I would love
subtitles
it
there,
if
but
we had some sports
there's 3
facilities
social
nearby.
media videos,
And
of
if the
which this is
community
a
worked
compilation.
together, we could really do our
And
part
it's
to
really,
prevent
again,
climate
these are
change.
being pushed out to social media platforms to try and engage and get people interested and to understand.
I can't believe how
what
long
this
it takes to
plan's
get here.
about.
There's always so much traffic. There's got to be a better option. And then we could use this car park for something more interesting.
Don't forget the milk!
Got it, Mum! The space is so boring. I wish they'd make some new spaces around here. Like maybe some more green spaces, and more things to do, places I could go on the weekend with the girls, and opportunities to get out and meet new people. This place could be really amazing, you know.
Thanks. So that's some of the video. This big debate event we're holding in Cambridge at the Corn Exchange on the 18th of February is essentially, we recognise there are groups in the area that have fully formed or quite well-formed ideas of how they think Greater Cambridge should change, and we wanted to create an opportunity for them to share that in an open way and to stimulate debate, which is the whole purpose of this consultation, really. So there's an opportunity for 8 groups to share their ideas in a quickfire Petra Kucha format, which I'd never heard of, but essentially is very quick fire slides. I think it's something like 20 slides, 20 seconds per slide, and part of the fun is that you kind of run out of time, I think. But it's about being provocative and airing ideas and stimulating the debate. So we'll see how it goes, but it feels quite an exciting thing to try anyway. But you can book tickets for that. We've got a nominal fee of £3, just recognising that if people sign up with no cost, you get a high no-show count. So that's the intention behind that, but you can sign up to that online as well. So last point, I guess, is you're here and hopefully you understand a bit more about what it's about, but please do share the word with other people. There's postcards out there on the table which you can take home with you. Your local members, hopefully, have got an information pack so they can tell you about these, and they have this slide pack as well, so they'll be hopefully able to inform you more about them. Thank you. Any questions?
Can you tell me who's responsible for making sure that there's enough water in the eastern region to cope with all these houses? There was an article in the Cambridge sort of news, it was on Cambridge Live, I think it was last summer, saying that the River Cam was running dry and that water for all these developments was coming from aquifers or the rivers. And this is the driest part of the country. Who is responsible for making sure that water is, protected, and that housing, is going to not damage the environment? Because I know that the water companies produce reports, but they haven't been statutory consultees in planning now for 7-8 years. So it's really important. Everyone has taps, everyone has baths, everyone has showers. That water is coming from somewhere, and I would really love to know where it's coming from. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. We do recognise this is a big issue, and it has been raised several times in the media and by a range of people over the last year particularly. I think there's a couple of answers to your question. So the Environment Agency are responsible for the protection of our water systems and key rivers. So they play a role in terms of abstraction licenses, and that is a key user of water in terms of farmers and everybody. The water companies have a statutory duty to provide water to homes, but in terms of new development in homes, we have a requirement to show that our local plan is deliverable and will achieve sustainable development. What that means is that, one, that we really engage very fully with the water companies and with the Environment Agency to ensure we're all joined up. And particularly recognising that this is a key issue right now and going forwards, we're commissioning a whole host of evidence for the local plan, one of which is a water cycle study. And in the brief for that, we've recognising that maybe there's a kind of interplay between the different parties, and maybe there's a responsibility that may get lost there. We've put in to have an independent expert to review the issue of water abstraction and water needs, so that we can have that view of that within that study. But in terms of the outputs that might mean, if that study tells us that we can't develop to a certain extent because of the impacts on water, then we'll need to consider what we can do about that. And if that's, well, part of the answer will be about maybe pushing for higher water efficiency standards. We'll need to explore all the issues, but working with partners once we know the answers to the question of what the impacts will be. Does that answer your question?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm really disappointed to hear that you're going to charge people £3 to come to a meeting to discuss the Greater Cambridge project. It's going to disenfranchise a lot of people, because for myself it would be at least £10 to come into a meeting for that purpose, and I don't think we should be charging at all, just to get people's views.
Okay. I'm sorry that you feel that way. So the reason that was done, as I mentioned, was that people setting up the event had experienced that if you don't charge a fee, then you will get a high dropout rate of people that might say, okay, I'll take 50 tickets, and then just don't turn up. So it was really to bring people together to have a positive event where there was lots of views shared. I recognise that the transport on top of the ticket cost does add something, but would say that maybe the £3 itself is probably about the cost of a bus ticket, which hopefully wouldn't be
£7 something from here.
Okay.
But also you were talking about 2 wards in Cambridge being the poorest, and yeah, you talked about inclusivity, and I don't think this is very inclusive.
We will take that back, certainly, in terms of future events. Yeah, that's probably all I can say. Thank you.
But we do lots of free events as well.
Yes.
So that everyone can go to an event. It just, if that one's not affordable, there will be lots of free ones all across the county that might be even closer to where they live. So hopefully there's something for everyone.
Yes, thank you. Thanks. And I guess that's the point about the online and trying to go to where people are. That's it's one small element of the consultation, I guess, and there's a whole range of other parts that's the only bit that is paid. But I take on board your point.
You mentioned changing water usage standards for new build. But surely the biggest problem is the existing housing stock. Is there anything the local plan can do about the existing housing stock?
It is very challenging. The local plan affects essentially development, which is doing something to your house which requires planning permission, or doing something to anything that requires planning permission. So it is a challenge. It's something to be explored, I think, in terms of, and again, it's challenging, but in terms of gathering funds potentially gained through development to use on tackling existing housing stock, potentially for water or potentially kind of zero carbon kind of climate or resource, heating and energy efficiency side of things. But it is a challenge. It's not the primary purpose of the local plan, I would guess.
Nope, I think we're good. Lovely. Thanks very much, Stuart. Thank you.